Yesterday, I told you the parable of the CEO who burns all their profits. It's about a CEO who runs a very successful business, but they have a very odd policy about profits. They hate them. As soon as even $1 of profits hits the company bank accounts, the CEO withdraws that money and sets it on fire. And everyone in the company begs the CEO to use that money, reinvest it, give it to employees, donate it, whatever, just don't burn it. But the CEO refuses. They say profits are morally bad. We must never have profits, even for a minute. And then, coincidentally, the CEO is always stressed about money, and they have no idea why they always seem to find themselves in a cash-strapped position. Now, of course, this story seems completely insane, but I told you that millions of high-stress, high achievers do this exact same thing every single day, not with money, but with praise, accolades, and positive feedback. So imagine a person who's very successful, but they have a very odd policy about praise. They hate it. As soon as even one word of praise is said to them, they reject it, discount it, argue with it, and then dismiss it. And everyone around them begs them to just believe that praise, build on it, lean into it, acknowledge it, don't just ignore it. But this person refuses. They say internalizing praise will make me arrogant. I must always be humble and vigilant and never internalize the praise, even for a minute. And then, coincidentally, this person is always stressed out about whether or not they're doing a good job. And they have no idea why they always seem to find themselves in this low confidence position. Now, what is the moral of this story? Like all stories, its moral is very open to interpretation. But let me tell you my moral of this story. My moral is, don't confuse a resource with an identity. Let me tell you what I mean. Money is a neutral resource. It can be used for good, it can be used for evil, it can be used in an interesting way, it can be used in a boring way, it can sit around not being used at all. And the mistake that the CEO in the parable is making is that they are attaching their identity to money. They are saying things like, holding on to profits will make me a money-grubbing capitalist, and good people are humble and poor, not flashy and rich. They're attaching their identity to money, instead of seeing money as a neutral resource that is simply passing through their hands, and seeing themselves as merely the temporary steward of that resource. A steward whose only job is to pass it on in whatever way to whoever they see fit. Now, plenty of people go around attaching their identity to money, even in the real world. But when you step back and think about it, it's relatively easy to see that money is a neutral resource and not an identity. It's pretty clearly a thing outside of you and not you. That's why the CEO in the parable seems absolutely insane. But now let's apply this concept to high stress, high achievers receiving praise. Because praise, positive feedback, and accolades are just an indicator that you are good at something. And you being good at something is a neutral resource. It can be used for good, it can be used for evil, it can be used in an interesting way, it can be used in a boring way, it can sit around not being used at all. And the mistake that you might be making is that you're attaching your identity to being good at something. You're saying things like internalizing the praise will make me an arrogant jerk face, and good people are self-effacing and constantly striving, not confident and securely on top of things. You're attaching your identity to being good at something, instead of seeing your skills and your competence as a neutral resource that is simply passing through your hands, and seeing yourself as merely the temporary steward of that resource. A steward whose only job is to pass it on in whatever way to whoever you see fit. Now, I know, seeing your own skills and competence as a neutral resource is a little more mind-bending. Money is clearly a thing outside of you, so it's easier to see as a neutral resource. But your skills and your competence seem so personal. They seem like they're actually you. But give this mental framing a try and see how it feels. Because here's the reality. Attaching your identity to anything is pretty freaking stressful. Because when you attach your identity to something, if it goes down, You go down with it. And even when it goes up, you're sitting there thinking the higher the rise, the bigger the fall. And you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. This is probably the number one reason why you don't want to internalize praise. It's certainly my number one reason. My brain intuitively associates high praise with a big fall. As I hear the praise, I can feel the bar and the expectations rising. I can hear the whisper in my mind, pride goeth before the fall. Don't internalize this. I can anticipate the crushing disappointment that I'll feel when I fail to meet this bar the next time around. And so I reject the praise out of hand and I refuse to internalize it. Now, this actually makes a ton of sense when I'm attaching my identity to being good at things. This is a very reasonable self-protective mechanism for my brain to activate when I'm attaching my identity to being good at things. But the result is that I am the same as the CEO who burns their profits the second they hit their bank account. Because whether you attach your identity to being good at something and therefore become really arrogant, that's like the CEO hoarding all the profits for themselves, or whether you attach your identity to being good at something and therefore become delusionally self-effacing. That's like the CEO burning the profits the second they hit their bank account. Attaching your identity to a resource leads to a poor use of that resource, either way. Seeing your own skill and competence as a neutral resource that is passing through you, and seeing yourself as merely a temporary steward of that resource is way less stressful, and it lets you be a better steward of that resource. Just like a CEO seeing themselves as a steward of their profits, and therefore not arrogantly hoarding them all for themselves, but also not delusionally burning them all the second they materialize. This is the premise of all the work that I do. This is the puzzle that I am constantly trying to solve. Less stress, more flow. How can you be less stressed out, less anxious, less tired, less burnt out, and do better work, better problem solving, have better insights, and get better results? How do you find the win-win? No rise and grind, no hustling all night, certainly no pain, no gain. How can you live in flow? This is the question we work on every single day in my course and coaching program. So if you want to be less stressed out and you want to do better work at the very same time, the ultimate win-win living in flow scenario, join the program waitlist today at the link above.